Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Implementing WCA in the Classroom webinar. This webinar will go over the Woodwork Career Alliance, or WCA Industry Tool Standards, and the training and curriculum program, and how you can implement it in your classroom and introduce the program to your students. We have two excellent speakers that will be presenting to you today. The first is Patrick Molzan. He's the Director of the Cabinet Making and Millwork Program at Madison College in Wisconsin. Prior to becoming an educator, Patrick ran his own business for several years, specializing in architectural millwork and custom furniture. He's a founding board member of the Woodwork Career Alliance, and in 2008, Patrick received the Distinguished Educator of the Year Award from WMIA, the Woodworking Machinery Industry Association. His writings have appeared in many publications, and he recently authored the 5th edition revision of the classic textbook, Modern Cabinet Making. You will also be hearing from Bert Christensen. Bert has had a love of woodworking since childhood, and he has taught woodworking for nearly 20 years at Central High School in Westosha, Wisconsin. He's currently the head instructor and chair of the Wood Manufacturing Department. He was one of the first certified WCA Skill Evaluators, and he assisted in the development and promotion of the textbook Modern Cabinet Making. He received his bachelor's in science biology education from University of Wisconsin Parkside and a master's in technology education from University of Wisconsin Platteville. I want to let everybody know there's a question section in GoToWebinar where you can post questions, and we will have a Q&A section at the end where we will review the questions that are posted and get those answered for you. I also want to let you know that this seminar is being recorded, and a link will be provided to all those who are registered, and it will also be posted on multiple websites that you can access after the webinar. So let's go ahead and get started, and we're going to start with Patrick.
Thank you, Adria. Just give me a second here to bring up the presentation. And thank you to all who have joined us. Just to check, can everybody, Adria, can you see my presentation?
I can.
You should. Excellent. Okay, thank you. So today we're going to talk about tools for teaching and evaluating the WCA standards. And just to go over what our goals are in this presentation, I'm going to assume that some of you may not know about the WCA or entirely about the credentialing path. So I'm going to do a little bit of review of what that's about. And then we hope to share some training resources that are readily available for you and others that you can access by becoming a member of the WCA. Hopefully we can help you get started if you are already a WCA member and are looking for tips of how you can implement. Bert has some great suggestions for classroom management, particularly at the high school level. So I'll be handing off the presentation about halfway through to him. And then I'm going to come back and I want to talk a little bit about recognition, recognizing your students through the WCA and what that has to offer, as well as reporting results. For our supporters, they want to see a return on investment, so I'll talk about some of the expectations and things that can help your program. And then, as Adria said, we'll have some time for Q&A. So with that, the WCA was created officially in 2007, though the organization, prior to that, the industry had been talking about standards in the woodwork industry for many years. And in 2007, the WCA was formed. And in the first 3 years, the WCA, the core mission was to develop standards. So what does it mean? What are the expectations when you run a board through a machine, whether it's a table saw, a joiner, or any other machine in our industry? What are the expectations? And we assembled a group of about 50 individuals from industry and education and all over the spectrum of the woodwork industry to discuss, debate, and come up with the core standards for machinery. And we've gotten through about 180 tools and machine operations to this point. There are still many many more to do, but after 3 years, in 2010, we started to focus on the second part of the mission for the WCA, which was to establish a credentialing ladder or a career path. And so what you see in front of you is the WCA credentialing path, starting at the green level, working its way up to diamond. And through this, an individual moves through the levels by doing performance evaluations and having time on task. So you'll see green, they need 6 months experience, 800 hours of experience, and on up. And they say a master in any industry is anywhere from 7 to 10,000 hours. And so this is very similar. It's almost like a mini apprenticeship in a way, reaching each level and culminating at the diamond level or master. But what we realized is that high schools need a place to enter in. And for many high schools, you don't have 800 hours in your program. So we created the Sawblade Certificate. And the Sawblade Certificate is the base level where a student enrolls in the WCA. And anyone that enrolls, you start with a passport. And it's a one-time fee of $55. And then you will always be recorded in our database on the WCA. And then the Sawblade Certificate does not have a minimum hour requirement. It has specific content that you need to cover that as high school teachers you are probably already covering. All candidates in the WCA start with basic measuring and layout. If you can't measure and layout, you really can't go anywhere as a woodworker. So that is the first step, and we have specific assessments for that. Then the Sawblade has 5 machines that students are measured on: the joiner, the table saw, 2 operations on the table saw, the portable hand sander, and a drill press. And you'll notice it says level 2 here. So the assessments through the WCA are divided into what we call level 1 and level 2. So level 1 assessment assumes that an individual can pass the board through the machine and end up with a quality product, but they're not expected to adjust the machine. And I think all of us are teaching our students to be able to adjust to some level to control that. And so we test on level 2, which would be, adjusting the blade height on a table saw, the fence, the angle, things like that. So again, the specific operations are edge joining on a joiner, 2 operations on the table saw, ripping and edge rabbiting, then sanding, and then finally drilling. Once the student has accomplished those tasks and been observed, then they take a written test. We have a 40-question online written test for the Sawblade Award, and the student must score 80%. And they keep taking the test. If they don't make it on the first try, they take it again until they score 80%. Once the student has accomplished that, essentially they've completed their work on the Sawblade Award, so Sawblade Certificate. The educator, the teacher, needs to record that in our registry, and once that's recorded for that student, it triggers a notice to our president. He signs a certificate and sends it off to the student or to the school, and they are recognized as receiving the Sawblade Award. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to stop there. As I said, the green has a minimum hour requirement of 800 hours of school and or work experience. And a lot of high schools may not have that much time, but you can continue to do observations of the student, and once they record that time, once they get that work experience, then they're eligible for the green certificate or green credential. So for example, I've had a number of Bert students, and he takes them beyond the Sawblade, and they come to me with several tool points that they've been assessed on, and I'm able to take them to green and often to the next level, which is blue. So green and blue are the first true stepping stones in the WCA credentialing ladder, and they're the only 2 that allow education experience. Beyond that, red, gold, and diamond all require real live work experience, whereas green and blue can be a combination of work and or education experience. All candidates, when they pass these levels, receive a pin, a patch, and a certificate that they can proudly display. So that's a little background on the WCA credentialing ladder. So again, as I said, the first 3 years were dedicated to writing standards. Then we dedicated about 3 years to creating that credentialing ladder, establishing the database and all of the back office systems to make this credentialing system work. And then the final part of the puzzle really is creating the training resources. And this is something I'm very excited to have launched last summer. I provided the initial training resources for WCA credentials, and it's the beginning of what I hope will be a large database of training materials. These are all accessible online if you have the EDU membership or manufacturing membership, and I'll explain more about that in a little bit. And first, I want to start out into kind of the basis for this. So what you see on the right is a standard learning plan that I use with my students. It provides the roadmap to a specific skill set. And so I'm going to show a little more detail of that. This happens to be for measurement. And the standard learning plan that I use, I give an overview of why this skill is important. And then I give the specific tasks they're going to do, in this case, reading and studying, observing and practicing, and then completing an exercise with an estimated amount of time. And I make my students track their time, and that way we have the ability to discuss if it's taking them longer, how I can assist better, or what their needs are. Then the body of the learning plan, I have the learning activities. And again, these learning plans are accessible to you as an education member of the WCA. And the learning activities will typically start with a reading assignment of some sort. And then there might be a presentation that can be done with an instructor or can be done online. Then there'll be some information, some supporting materials. Often there'll be videos. In my college, I do self-directed learning with my students, so they have the ability to kind of move at their own pace, move ahead, study units on demand. And so a lot of this is laid out with that in mind. Then they'll go through a series of activities. They'll practice, in this case, practicing with calipers. There's a written test on measurement that they go through, and finally, the exercise. And it is the measurement widget. I'm going to show a few slides coming up of how we assess measurement in the WCA. At this point, I also want to talk about modern cabinet making and give a shout out to my publisher, Goodhart Wilcox. Most of my reading assignments do come from modern cabinet making, and as Adria said, I was hired to revise this textbook. The new text, the 5th edition, came out in 2016, and I'm very proud of it. It made a huge leap forward from the previous edition, which was last updated in 2005. Some of the items that modern cabinet making features are detailed terminology, step-by-step procedures, a lot of safety notes and illustrations, and new photographs. The publisher said to me there will be no more black and white photographs in the edition, and so that meant about 750 photos, a lot of which we took at our facility here in Madison, but also a lot I got from industry contacts. There's also sections on green notes in each chapter, as well as test your knowledge questions, and then suggested activities, extensions for math and reading activities. One of the neat things that the publisher did is the editor took the WCA standards and created a correlation chart where they captured all of the places in the text that refer to the general considerations, the pre-operation checklist, and the actual standards. So that was great to have that and see how modern cabinet making dovetails with the WCA standards. One resource that anyone can access right now are videos that I have up on YouTube, and there is the URL for my site, or you can search for it using my first and last name. Don't just use my last name, because you'll get an actress who's much more famous than I. So make sure you use Patrick in there and last name, or if you have a chance to write this URL down. But I have over 50 videos on YouTube right now. Most of them are 3 to 7-8 minutes. I try to keep them brief. Specific topics, they're sorted by lists. So we have portable power sanders, we have measurement and layout, we have a number of videos on the table saw, drill press, sanding, shaper, 7 categories in the WCA of tools that we use. So feel free to access that on demand. One of the ways we teach here, because we have students working independently, is we need to know that they've been through, reviewed the content, and thoroughly understand it. And so we use demonstration checklists. So what you're seeing before you now is a demonstration checklist for the biscuit joiner. And the typical checklist is going to start out with, tell me about the hazards for this machine and show me how we would lock it out in the case of servicing or blade changing. Then they'll go into showing the parts and pieces of the machine. There might be some questions on safety. And then ultimately, what do you do with this machine? So in the case of a biscuit joiner, there are 4 different operations, different types of joints. They need to demonstrate how they register the material and align the tool. And then sometimes there'll be test your knowledge questions that we'll ask as part of the demonstration, such as, what are the common biscuit sizes, or how far apart should biscuits be? This is a nice resource, again, that's available as part of our education membership for teachers. And it can be, in a sense, used as a liability waiver for you. Our students are required to sign off that they've read the safety instructions and reviewed everything and before they get our approval. I also want to share some of the assessment forms and materials that we have as part of the WCA. So as I mentioned, we have over 180 tool machine operations, and we have assessment forms for these operations. And then we have some assessment activities. So in this case, I'm showing a layout activity that I use with my student. You don't have to use this particular assessment activity, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel either. It's there for you, and if you want, you can use it to make things work easier. Here's the measurement widget that we use, and I have that available as a PDF, but also available as a CAD file. So if you have a school, if you have a CNC router, you can take that CAD file and make your own widgets. The widgets are also available if you don't have a CNC and you want to purchase them. They're available through the WCA for purchase. This is the assessment sheet that goes with it, and that's available as a download, and the student fills out the answers to all of these particular measurement tasks, and then you complete the grading for them. Finally, one more widget that I'm going to share with you. This is what I call the Sawblade test widget. I imagine we're all struggling on budgets, and so I try to design the widgets and the assessments to use the minimal amount of material. So our president asked if I would design a widget for the Sawblade test. And again, this is something that you can use or you can assess in a different way as long as you do the operations. But one piece of wood, basically a 1x6 piece of material, 16 inches long, where they can complete 5 different operations, from 2 operations on the table saw to joining it, to laying out and drilling a hole, and finally sanding it. So as I said earlier, entry into the WCA starts with the purchase of our passport. This is for everybody, whether you're a teacher, student, or somebody working in industry. The passport is your identity. It has a unique number, and it's linked to our registry. When we first came up with the passport idea, the idea was that we were going to assess individuals, and then we would write the tool or machine and the date and stamp it and sign it. And it didn't take long for us to realize that there are more machines coming out, new machines all the time. And what do you do when you have to put a new machine in? Do you sew in pages or what? And so ultimately we made the decision that the passport was going to contain the person's picture, their identity, and information on the WCA, but the real record of an individual's achievement is our electronic database, what we call the registry. This is what the registry looks like when you log in, and everybody has their own personal login and password that they create, and it contains your information, your contact information, email. You have the ability to purchase credits. When you do evaluations, there is a fee to pay for that evaluation. That's what keeps the lights on, keeps the database running for the WCA. We are a nonprofit, but we do have to have income or revenue coming in to keep things going. As I mentioned earlier, we have a WCA education membership. Now, this is specifically for schools. We also have one for companies called our manufacturers membership. But the education membership has some great benefits to it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those benefits. For $250 a year, you get an essentials donation package that basically recoups that money that you pay out. So a $50 coupon for screws from Quick Screws. Digital membership to Fine Woodworking and Fine Home Building, where you can get the latest editions of the magazine. Veneer Tech, if you want, and we have this designed on a sign-up system, so you declare which of these things you want, but Veneer Tech will ship you a box of veneer every year. Franklin ships 2 gallons of glue, and who doesn't need glue, right? So every year, a couple gallons of glue, assuming you go in and say, yes, I want glue, will appear at your door. This year, Bessie gave free clamps to the first 50 schools that signed up, and they give 40% off their clamps for all schools. Rockler every year puts together a mystery package of things you need or can use. So this year it was some clamping squares and a layout device. In addition to these essential or tangible supplies, we have a streamlined registration process that helps you get all of your students and their passports registered. Basically, you fill out an Excel spreadsheet. Bert's going to describe how he does that with his students, and then your passports will arrive. With that come 10 free credits, which pays for the Sawblade award, and access to the online test. You also have access to training and evaluation materials, much of the assessment materials that I just showed, and you can also attend an accredited skill evaluator training that's included as part of your annual membership fee. At this point, I just want to talk briefly about how I assess students, and then I'm going to hand the floor over to Bert to talk about how he implements the WCA in his high school. I do issue, starting this past year, I started issuing the Sawblade Award to all of my students. It's included in the price of tuition during their first semester, and all of the assessments are part of their standard learning activities anyhow, so they will end up after the first semester with the Sawblade Award. Beyond that, then it's a voluntary activity for my students, and I've taken students as high as the blue level. Basically, they set up an appointment with me, and typically I'll do 2 students at once, and they'll be doing different activities, and while one is setting up a machine, I'm observing the other one do the operation. So that's how I do it here. Again, it's very flexible, the WCA system, depending on what your needs are and what you want to assess. So at this point, I'll be coming back later in the presentation just to talk a little bit more about the WCA as the organization, but we're going to move on to Bert's presentation.
All right, can I be heard?
I can hear you, Bert.
All right, I'm bringing up my screen right now. All right, is my presentation up?
Yes, it is.
Okay, then I will begin. Thank you both. So my purpose here today as a high school teacher is to show you how over the last several years I've brought the WCA into my classroom and how I make it all fit within my curriculum. And during this, I'll also be giving you some information on how I do assessment using video. And once again, there'll be time to ask questions about this at the end. So to begin with, starting the school year, we always have to try to get the order out for the passports. And the system was originally designed for people to order, their own passport. And once students started coming on board, we needed to be able to order passports in a bulk order. And so they developed this form. And it's a spreadsheet. And just a tip for teachers, the way that I do this is when I have my students in the classroom, I send them this on a Google Drive spreadsheet, and then I can watch on my monitor as they all work on this shared document, and I can make sure that they're filling things in correctly, and point out if they're making any errors, or assist them if they don't know what their zip code is, or something like that. So what I need to do here is I can't get access to the closeout button because it's covered by our on-screen things. So let me see what I have to do to close it out. All right. It won't let me get out of here, so I'm going to do that. Okay, we're back. The next thing is you have to provide headshots in order for the passports to be processed so that the students can have their pictures in it. So you're just going to want to take a simple headshot like this one here. And I obviously blanked out the student, but they just need a fairly good resolution headshot. Close up, I just took this with my phone against the wall, and I have all the students line up in their turn, and then I can send them off using Box to the WCA. And let's see here. If I can get this to close out. It doesn't seem to want to. All right, good. I apologize, but it keeps covering up the close box with the control thing. So the next thing is placing a bulk order. You're going to have your school pay for this. And what I do is I just send them a link to the actual bulk order page that's on the WCA website, which you see right here. So I direct our purchasing person to this page, and then they're able to complete the transaction and buy all the passports at once using the school credit card. Okay. Now, the class fee. So it costs $55 for each student to become a WCA member. This can be a big problem for schools when you're under pressure to keep your fees low. And in my case, it's why I choose to do this in the third year Woods course when students are juniors or seniors. And I've always sold it as sort of the equivalent of paying a fee to take an advanced placement course that they might do in another academic area. If you're going to try to do it earlier in their high school career, when they're younger, it's possible it could be a harder sell. But as far as in my case, it's just the course fee, and it covers the membership, and I haven't had any issues with people arguing about paying it. As far as the education membership, the subscription, basically you go to this web page, and this is where I send our CTE coordinator, and they pay for this out of Perkins funds. So that's not something that comes out of my budget either, and it's really what our person is, they're happy to pay it because that's the kind of thing they want to spend their Perkins money on. Next, the benefits. So this is a picture of the things that we've received, things from Rockler, Screws. One tip is that Quick Screws gives you $50 for free. but they charge shipping and handling up until you make a $100 purchase. So I always buy $100 worth, get 50 of it for free, and don't have to pay the shipping, which the shipping's usually equivalent to, you know, like one of these boxes of screws. So it makes sense to plan ahead and buy all of that at the same time. Now, into the second week, we start with measurement and layout, and the tape measure is first. And the WCA, if you're a member, you can go and log in and you can have access to these assessment forms. You'll get a password, you go in, you'll select the measurement and layout forms you want to use, and you can download them as PDFs and make copies. Now, I make a copy of all 4 of these, you know, 1 through 4 for the tape measure, and I put them in a packet and I give them to the students to work their way through. This is what the first one looks like, measuring length with a tape measure. There's a list of pre-operation items, considerations, and again, level 1 is the kind of thing I would teach to first-year students, level 2, second-year students, and when they get to the 3rd year, they're basically just being tested as final proof that they can demonstrate these skills without any issue. So I'll move that over. All right. And what I do in order to actually test this is I have widgets like Patrick described. And this is an example of a measurement widget where the students can take this board, hook their tape measure on, measure these 5 lines, which is what's called for in the assessment. And then they report out to me by recording these numbers, and I go through and check it with them to make sure they're correct. And if so, then they pass that part and they move on. Now, all of this information is covered in the Sawblade test that they will take at the end of the year. So I provide them with notes as we go. This is an example of measurement and layout notes that I have compiled from all of the things in the assessment forms and so forth. And they're given these notes, and they're also given a quiz. I put a simple quiz, and we use Moodle. I mean, you could use Google Classroom or Blackboard or other things. And just a note, don't wait for the passports to show up to begin this. You don't really need them until you decide to give them to the students, and I don't do that until the very end of the year. If they really want to see it, that's fine, but I've had too many of them lose them, so I don't hand them out until near the end. Round about the 4th week, we begin the second one, which is caliper, and it proceeds much the same way. There's assessment forms that I give them in a packet. They work their way through these, performing activities that demonstrate these skills. And one of the ways I do that is with some widgets that I have them make. So they take a scrap piece, just some simple MDF. They cut a dado groove, and they drill various holes, and they use the dial caliper to make all sorts of measurements of thickness and width and depth. And they record them on the assessment forms, and then they're checked. And if they're correct, then they pass, and we move on to the next. So the final item is the combination square. And what they have is the same thing, a packet. They get to take a board, and I'll show you the widget that they do here. They have to record a 90-degree angle. It has to go all the way around, and they also have to lay out 45-degree. They, with each of these things, there's certain modern cabinet making chapters and pages that go with it. Now, this brings us to a point in October where the deadline is looming for signing up for your benefits. And it's a pull system. So if you don't remember to sign up, even if you're a member, they won't send you the stuff. So make sure that you sign up by the end of October to get all of the things that your membership has paid for. November is the time when I sit down and I record in the registry what they've accomplished so far. The registry is very quick. Once you're in, it's very quick to enter many things for each student. It's slow going from student to student because you have to search for them each individually. They're not grouped necessarily by your school. So it's wise to go in once, find each student, check off many things for them, and then move on to the next student. Don't try to do each individual assessment one at a time. Otherwise, you'll be spending a lot of time on the registry that you won't want to. So when we move into second semester, then we have the 5 machines. And the first one that I usually do is the joiner. And the way that I assess this is I have them make a video of themselves demonstrating the skills that they need on the joiner. I provide them with a checklist, and you can see it here. And what it does is it gives them the things they should do ahead of time, preparing for shooting the video, and then a step-by-step sort of script of what they should show in the video to prove that they know what it is that they're doing. And when they're done, they simply upload it to YouTube. They send me the link so I can watch it when it's convenient. And they turn in the board that they actually perform the operation on with their name on it, sort of like turning in a homework assignment. And that way I can check it all over. And if I have to go back and talk to them about it, I will do that. And then it makes for some good feedback and even some reteaching if necessary. And they're provided with notes, which you can look at. I'm not going to go through them now. And of course, they get a quiz. Then we move on to ripping on the table saw. Again, there's a checklist that shows them what they need to put in the video. There's notes, readings, quiz. And before I play this, for those of you who are watching this after the fact, recorded, you won't see the video. You'll have to go to this link that's listed below, and you can access the video online and watch it. I'm just going to play a short bit of this video so you can see what a student-made video looks like.
Bert, you want to change it to show the video?
Okay.
See where it says show my screen?
Okay. I'm clicking down. It's playing on my end, so I have a hard time figuring it. Okay. So that was an example, just a short excerpt. That video total probably ran about 4 minutes. And the students go through and they record exactly what they need to show in order to meet the standard. So it's an excellent learning experience because when the students are collaborating to shoot each other's videos, they actually start to become critics and they'll correct each other. And I tell them that to pretend like they're the teacher and they're the ones teaching everyone else what's going on. So it ends up being a really good way to document the skill. And also it frees me up so I don't have to stand. I don't have the time to stand and observe them as I might like to, so I can watch them at my convenience. So we move into March, and there's a second skill that needs to be performed on the table saw. And you actually get a choice between edge rabbiting with a single blade, or you can perform an edge rabbit with the dado set. That's really up to you. Again, I have a checklist so they can show a video, create a video to show me on this. And then we move forward into April, and it's time for sanding. And there's a standard assessment form that's provided by the WCA for this. And I have them just produce an example product because video is not very effective for this one, just watching them sand for minute after minute. But what they do is they start off with a board and they have to take dial caliper readings of its thickness and write it down. And then after the sanding is performed, they check it again, and it's able for them to prove that they've sanded it flat and not sanded it into a situation where the thickness has become, all unequal. So lumber and millwork knowledge is also part of the test, and this is the time when I usually give them the notes on that and we discuss the topics. There's a chapter to go along with that from modern cabinet making. They take a quiz. These quizzes culminate into basically them having experienced all of the information that will be on the Sawblade test. So it's not a surprise, and it's really an expectation that they shouldn't have a hard time passing it at all. Next we have skills in boring, and so they have to drill holes at a specified location. Again, they make a video of this. There's a checklist which you'll be able to see if you were to click on this after the fact, and you'll get a copy of this presentation if you want. Notes, chapter that goes with it, quiz. When we arrive into May, this is the time when I'm recording all of the final results of those machine assessments in the registry. This is the point at which I hand out passports, and it's now time to get the students acquainted with how they can go online and take the quiz. So this is the location in the website where the quiz can be taken, and there's a place where you can enter the passport number, and each of them has their own unique passport number. And when you go into a student's passport, you can see the highlighted area. There's 6 digits there, and really that's their login. They log into the site, put in the digits, take the test, hopefully achieve an 80% or better, and if they don't, then they can retake until they do. Then we're getting later into May, and this is at the point where I'm confirming with them that they've taken the quiz, they've passed it, or I pester them until they do. In the greater scheme of things, this is also the time when the final project work deadlines have been made and students have to finish up what they've been working on. We're looking at shop shutdown and annual student maintenance, things that I have them do before they leave for the year. And then finally we get to summer, and summer's the time when you need to reflect, refine, prepare for the next school year. And one of the key things here is the WCA provides a checklist, and you can access this checklist if you're a member, and it takes you through all of the different things you need to do when you need to do them, and it can keep you on track so that you don't forget something important, or you're not surprised about what may be coming at you next. So to finish off, there's a QR code here on the screen, and if you scan that, it will give you access to most of the materials I've talked about, checklists, videos, pictures, things like that, and also my email address. So if you have questions or you need to contact me at a later time, you can do so, and I'm happy to send you what I can or answer whatever questions you might have. And now I believe we're going back to Patrick so he can do a wrap up.
Okay. Thank you, Bert. Adria, can you confirm my screen is up there with the WCA?
Yep, I can see your screen. I can hear you.
Excellent, excellent. Nothing like presenting in your office and you have no idea what the outside world is seeing. Anyhow, as you can see from Bert's part of the presentation, he's done a great job of really implementing the system in his curriculum, and he really didn't have to start over or do a lot of different things. He's kind of made it just part of his regular practice, and it works really well with the competencies he's measuring and was measuring before he had WCA. What I want to talk about briefly is why the WCA exists, and really we go to what we call the 3 R's. We're here to recognize, reward, and rejoice. And I always like to go back to, the credentialing system and certification and what it's about. And we see it in a lot of different industries. We see it in metalworking, we see it in welding, but I always go back to ASE, Automotive Service Excellence. And I share the story that when I was growing up, it wasn't a certified auto mechanic that you brought your car to. We called them grease monkeys, and that was the level of respect that they were given. And ASE came about and created a structure and a continuous improvement training system. And now when you go to have your car serviced, you see all of the certificates on the wall, and an auto mechanic is respected and paid well for it. And that's really what we want to do for the woodwork industry, for woodworkers. It is a profession that people that people give a lot of time to developing their skills and talents. Dedicate was the word I was looking for there. And we need to celebrate and be respected for it. So recognizing your students' achievements, the WCA gives that opportunity through the credentials, rewarding them with their certificates, and then rejoicing, announcing to the world that, hey, there are good things happening. So when you do award that Sawblade certificate or any other level, create a ceremony, make a big deal of it, get your administrators, your counselors, your parents, invite them. And, the kids like recognition and are deserving of recognition for their hard work. And to come full circle, share that news with the WCA. We have supporters, and again, as I said in the beginning, our supporters want to see a return on their investment. So we need to share those news stories. I also want to send out a plea to help build this library of resources. I know there are a lot of teachers doing great things out there and have great ideas, and really, we're interested. So if you've got something you feel very passionate about that you think would aid our library of resources, send it in, and we'll use it in some way, and you'll get a little promotion for it yourself. But we want to create a database or a compository of the best resources that are available. So that was our goal in today's presentation, was to tell you about the WCA credentialing path and show you some resources that you can access both now and as becoming a member of the WCA if you're not already. And really, for those of you that are members, hopefully you've got some ideas about how you can implement in your curriculum if you're not already. Bert had a bunch of different strategies that he uses with his students and makes it happen, on an annual basis. So at this point, we have time, I believe, for some questions. And Adria, I'm going to pass it back to you to handle that.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick. Okay, the first question we have is, do most of your students pass the Sawblade test and get the certification?
If that's for me,
I'm going to defer to Bert on that.
Okay, so I have made the Sawblade Award test the final exam for the course. And unless they choose not to do the activities, which would result them in being failures in the course, it's not like an option that they can choose not to do. I mean, you can't choose not to do the final exam. I just give them a month to do it, and they do it, prior to the end of the year. And if they don't, then they would get an incomplete until they do. So there's really not any argument. And every student who passes the course gets the Sawblade Award.
Excellent. I do know that there are some post-secondary instructors in the audience. Patrick, I'm sure it's handled a little differently at the community college level.
It can be, as I said, this year was our first year to actually issue a Sawblade Award. When it originally came out, we envisioned it was primarily targeted toward high school. But I began issuing it last fall, and as I said earlier, I've integrated it into the cost of tuition, and all students get it. If you pass the course, you've passed the outcomes And so last fall, all of my students got it. And then beyond that, then I make it optional for the students that want to go to a higher level. And they have some skin in the game. They have to raise some of the funds to pay for their credential. And so those that want to go and have that elect to do it. And I typically will get probably 30 to 50% of my students will elect to get the green credential. And if they have the hours of experience, then we can also take them to blue.
Great. Okay, we have two kind of related, I think they're a similar topic. Where do you find the time to fit the certification in, / specifically for Bert, are your students building a project, or do you just have them doing the WCA standards? So essentially, how do you marry this with everything else that you're doing in your classroom?
All right. So my students are that are doing this are in the 3rd full year of woodworking. And while they're doing this, they're receiving dual credit with Madison College for completing this woodworking curriculum. This is all tied together because, of course, I'm working with Patrick on that end, and we're also related through the WCA. It's all really the same thing. So my students are doing projects all throughout, and as we're going along, and as you know, they're using the joiner and the drill press and the saw to create these projects anyhow. We just take a little time out. It's usually for them, it's like maybe one class period a month where they need to sit down and actually demonstrate and confirm with video or on paper sometimes that they can do these skills. And it's really a very small portion of the time that I'm actually spending working with them.
Excellent. Okay. How do you get students to pay for certification?
In my case, our principal and our curriculum director made the decision, like 6 or 7 years ago, that because certifications are important, that it would just become an integral and non-voluntary part of the course, just like taking an AP course. The $55 is, non-negotiable. I mean, I'm sure they deal with certain kids who have economic issues, and they help them that way. That's not really my end of it, but it's just never been an issue. It's part of the registration fee they pay with all their other courses at the beginning, and I've really never had any resistance to it, but mostly it's because these are kids who I've had for 3 years and they're all in. If you were trying to do this with first-year students who maybe aren't as dedicated and haven't pursued this for 3 years, that's something I haven't had to deal with, and I'm guessing there would be some strategies for that, but it would be something we would have to discover because I haven't had to do it that way.
And I'd like to just chime in there and share a couple of strategies that we use. First of all, we have a student club, and I think most of us, we build things and we constantly have people coming to us with requests. And so we will charge for our services a nominal fee that goes into the student club. So we can use that money to help fund students. Again, I like the students to have some skin in the game, but they can work it off. So they have opportunities. Somebody comes and says, I need a little cabinet built. I can have a student that wants certification, build it. And, the money that goes in the club can then pay for their certification. The other option that's out there for EDU members, for education members, is that their students can apply for scholarship money through the WCA. We have some industry supporters that have donated funds, and we have an education fund that is used for two purposes. One, it's used for teachers to try to get them to the trade shows like AWFS has, and it's also used for students to help fund their passports. And so they fill out an application, submit it, the education committee reviews it and notifies them if they have the funds or not.
And something we should mention for those who are listening in from Wisconsin, the Sawblade Award does qualify for Act 59 grant money. And for every student you certify, at least last year, it was $750 that came back to the district. And so if you were at least able to get started, you could use those monies going forward for as long as they last to help defray the cost of this if you didn't want to charge the students that money outright.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. I want to be respectful of your time, but we have a couple more great questions. Are you okay?
Sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The first one is, when and where is Educator Evaluator training?
So I will do, it depends, it's driven by need and demand. I typically do one training annually here at the college. AWFS has been very gracious in allowing us to do training at the show in July in the odd years. We are working on an online training connected by technology, so by Skyping, that you can work a training in that way for people that are further away or have a hard time getting to training. So through our website, we typically will announce trainings, and again, when we get a cohort of enough to make it financially feasible to deliver training, we will offer it.
Thank you. How can I find a list of professionals in my city who also use the WCA passports?
That's a good question. I was going to say, on our website, we have a map with WCA sites, but those are training sites, our education sites. We don't have our industry sites. So my suggestion would be to email our president. And if you see the screen now, you'll see his email down there, snelsonwca@gmail.com, Scott Nelson, and he can tell you the nearest companies to you.
Okay.
And can I just add to that? One of the ideas that we had in creating the WCA is that companies would need evaluators that are outside their companies to come in. And so we see this as an opportunity for educators, particularly in your summers, if you have time, where you could basically be an independent contractor and sell your services as an independent examiner for their employees.
Okay. Great. We are currently moving towards NCCER certification in our program. Are these programs similar? I like the way this one is built with education in mind.
Bert, do you want to address that at all?
So I'm currently teaching and using NCCER in my construction courses, which I teach at the same time and alongside of the woodworking. And I guess the biggest comparison is that the WCA provides a lot more resources, like access to the widgets and more in-depth assessment materials. The NCCER stuff, I think, is good and fine, relatively easy to use. I just think the WCA stuff, in my experience, goes into much more in depth about what does it actually look like for a student to demonstrate the skill. I guess as far as that goes, they both take, probably at least a semester to do. There's a lot more paperwork with NCCER than there is with WCA, and they don't assess the same things. NCCER is much more job site, hard hat, how to move materials around, on a job site and things like that, where WCA is very specific to machines and operations that you would use in woodworking.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think we got one more. We got a nice comment for you, Bert. Very cool idea to have students work together to create the video for evaluation. New idea to me. So thank you for sharing that. Final question is, how much is the educator training? Does a high school teacher have to have the training to get started?
Yes. So the educator training is $250 for an evaluator training, but that's included with the cost of the education membership. So, you know, it's a wash there. You pay a $250 fee, you've got access to all those goodies that we talked about, and included is a voucher for a free training. And it's just, you need to get to that training wherever it is. And I can guarantee, you know, that pretty much that we do have them at the AWFS in Las Vegas, and generally we're going to have one in a region of the country that you can get to.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. I think this is a really valuable and helpful session. And as I said before, this is recorded, and the link will be shared within the next 24 hours to everyone who registered, and will also be posted on some websites. So thank you all for participating, and thank you to Bert and Patrick for sharing your wealth of knowledge about WCA.
My pleasure.
Yep, same here. Thank you, Adria.
Wonderful. Have a great day. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.